Hello and welcome to the next learning module on the topic of cinematography. Let's start off by providing a definition for cinematography. So cinematography is defined as the motion picture photography associated with the artistic and technical matters related to the look of a film. Now it's important for us to be aware that our entry point into the film as viewers is the camera. Filmmakers strategically place the camera in relation to the subject in the world of the film for narrative, aesthetic, and thematic reasons. Now, therefore, we as viewers identify with the lens. In other words, wherever the camera is, that's where we are as viewers. And that's why it's important for us to understand and appreciate and learn more about the different elements of cinematography. So let's now take a look at the basic elements of cinematography. We'll start with the frame. Now the frame is everything in the physical borders of a single film image. It is the most basic element of filmmaking. A shot is defined as a continuous series of frames captured on film or video. A take is a different version of a particular shot. Then there's a scene. Now a scene is a series of continuous shots connected by time, space, and narrative subject matter. And then there are sequences. Now a sequence is a series of scenes strung together based on time, space, and narrative cohesion. And finally, there's a film. And a film is a collection of sequences strung together to form the complete narrative. Let's now take a look at how the basic units of cinematography relate to the visual language of cinema. We'll take a look at these basic elements and their linguistic equivalents. We'll start with the frame. Now, a frame is equal to the letter or a character. The shot or take is equal to the word or a sentence. A scene is a paragraph or series of sentences. A sequence is a series of paragraphs. And a film would be the equivalent to a complete literary work, like a poem or a novel of some kind. Let's now take a look at cinematography and the three film styles we've been studying up to this point. Let's start with realism. So realism in cinematography is when you have longer takes and fewer stylistic shots, and there's an emphasis on approximating reality. Formalism is more experimental cinematography where the form is more important than the content or the story. And classicalism is when the duration and type of shots fit the dramatic purposes of the film. Again, with the classical style, everything serves the narrative. Let's take a look at the aspect ratio of the frame. Now, the aspect ratio is defined as the relationship between the frame's width to its height. Think of the frame like a painter's canvas where the filmmaker creates and arranges the visual and audio elements that make up a film. Now, depending on the aspect ratio, different framing strategies come into play. Let's now take a look at the different elements of cinematography. We'll start with shot size. Now, shot size is defined as the camera distance in relation to the subject. Camera angles refer to the camera height in relation to the subject. Frame compositions refer to the arrangement of items in the frame. Depth of field refers to the amount of space in the frame in clear focus. And then there are camera movements, and this is when the camera moves closer to or further away from a subject. Now, this can occur when the camera physically moves closer or further away from a subject, or when the focal length changes, where you can zoom in or zoom out. Now, this refers to the concept of implied proximity, which we'll cover later in this tutorial video. It's important to keep in mind how these elements of cinematography relate to the visual language of cinema. These elements provide viewers with key visual narrative information. They help set a tone, convey a concept, or deliver a particular message. They also help convey different meanings depending on their arrangement and context. Now, this is the art of cinematography, in being able to tell the story visually through the use of different shot types, camera angles, or camera movements. Let's take a look at the different shot sizes and shot types, ranging from the extreme long shot to the extreme close-up. Now, I provided you with descriptions and examples of every one of these different shot types that you can look at on your own, and you will be responsible for them in subsequent assignments. Just keep in mind that the different shot sizes tell us something about the scene. Moving on to camera angles, which is defined as the camera height in relation to the subject, ranging from the overhead angle to the ground level angle, including the canted or Dutch angle. I have provided you with examples and descriptions of each of these camera angles and how they apply to the visual language of cinema. Then there's frame composition. Now, there are many elements that go into composing the frame, such as the rule of thirds, which is a common compositional strategy used in film. There are things like the midground, the foreground, and the background. There's headroom, look room, and lead room, and various other compositional strategies commonly used in film. Moving on to depth of field, which refers to the amount of the frame that's in acceptable focus. Now, there are different types of focus used in film, like shallow focus when a very small portion of the frame is in focus. There's deep focus when the entire frame is in focus. There's soft focus when the entire frame is slightly out of focus. And then there are special types of focus with certain attachments and lenses. One is called the split diopter, where a very thin part of the frame in the middle is out of focus. And then there is the tilt-shift lens, which helps create a miniature effect in film. Then there are the different camera movements. Now, this is when the camera moves, whether it's rotating on the tripod or moving on dollies or a Steadicam. The camera is moving closer or further away from the subject. The different types of camera movements include the tilt, the pan, tracking or trucking shots, a push in or pull out, and then there are crane shots or Steadicams or handheld shots. Now let's talk about a different type of camera movement, which is an apparent camera movement, but the camera doesn't move at all. What's changing is the focal length. Now, this is when the camera can zoom in or zoom out, making it look like the camera is getting closer or further away from the subject. Now, this leads back to the concept of implied proximity. Implied proximity is the apparent distance between the camera and the subject, even if the camera itself is physically close to the subject. It's determined by the focal length and/or distance of the camera in relation to the subject. Let's take a look at some of the different types of apparent camera movement, starting with the zoom in. Now, the zoom in occurs when the focal length is increased and it appears that the camera is moving closer to the subject. The zoom out is just the opposite, when you decrease the focal length and it appears as though the camera is getting further away from the subject. Keep in mind that the camera is remaining stationary the entire time, leading back to the concept of implied proximity or implied distance from the subject. There are different types of zoom in and zoom out that are used stylistically, commonly known as the Kung Fu zoom. Now, this gets its name because it originated in many different Kung Fu films, but it's also used by Quentin Tarantino and other filmmakers to draw attention to particular elements in a frame without having to do a complete different camera setup. Then there is rack focus, also known as push-pull. This is when the focus in the frame changes from one subject to another. It's often used to draw attention to a particular element or add dramatic tension to a scene, and all without having to move the camera and do another camera setup. And finally, there's the dolly zoom, which is a specialized camera technique that involves both physically moving the camera and changing the focal length simultaneously. This is also known as the vertigo shot. It's often used to enhance the dramatic tension of a scene or make a character come to a dramatic realization by adding that element to the scene with that particular camera movement. This concludes the cinematography tutorial video. It's now time for you to move on to the short film clip viewing assignment.